Hi, in this video on the Poppins bag, I'm going to talk about how to make your bag with 2.5-inch strips. You can make your bag with a focus fabric and with coordinating binding, but in this video we're going to talk about the 2.5-inch strips. The 2.5-inch strip packs are wonderful to make the bag with. These are Island Batik strip packs. And in the Island Batik strip packs, they have 2 strips of fabric that are the same. And there are 40 strips, so there are 20 strips of the same fabric. So you can actually make the front of the bag and the back of the bag exactly the same. If you're working with a Bally Poppy, you're going to have different strips on the front and the back. Now a Bally Poppy only has 20 strips in it, so just cut an additional 6 strips from your pocket fabric or your binding fabric, because you will need 26 strips for the bag if you're going to do the 2.5-inch strips. Now I'm going to move up a little bit here. I recommend that you lay your strips out in the order that you want them to appear in the bag. Each set of strips has 2 strips, and the cutting directions are in your pattern. So you're going to cut 2 strips. One will be for the outside of the bag and one will be for the inside of the bag. And again, because you're making a front and a back, you'll need 2 sets of these. So the next step is that you're going to be adding interfacing to these strips. When you do that, you're going to be working with your strips. You're going to be working from the center out. So this will be the very center strip. So what you'll do is, this is a very big bag. We strongly recommend that you use 2 strips of interfacing throughout the bag body. So what you'll do is you will take your strips of interfacing, and notice I have parchment paper on my ironing surface. You can use parchment paper or a Teflon ironing sheet. Place the interfacing strip down on the parchment paper. Place your fabric on top. Center it, and you'll be able to feel the edge of the interfacing. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered, but just make sure that it is somewhat centered. You're going to fuse that Inner Form Plus to your 2 strips, and then you're going to place one on top of the other and fuse the 2 together so that you will have a piece that looks like this. So here you have your 2 pieces of fabric, and your inner form is on the center. The next thing that you're going to do is you're going to take 2 pieces of fabric, and this is and I've actually sewn the 2 pieces of fabric to the left and the right of that center strip. You're going to place a piece of fabric on top and one on the bottom. And you're going to sew both of those on with a 1/4 inch seam. Now I happen to have done both sides here. So let me just fold these out so you can see. Like that. So one on top, one on bottom. And then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take the interfacing, and we are going to fuse 2 pieces of interfacing to each side. Take your interfacing, butt it right up next to the seam allowance, as close as you can get. Pull your strip out. Now the edge of your strip is going to extend a little bit beyond that interfacing. Iron it on. I like to use a little burst of steam when I do that. Flip it over. Take another strip of interfacing lay it on top of the first, pull your fabric over, and again it should pull over just a little bit past that interfacing. Fuse that on. I'm going to do that one more time for you on the other side. So that's fused on both sides. And you may go back and fuse the first side a little bit more thoroughly. Okay, so tuck your fabric up underneath. That's probably one thing I didn't say first. Tuck the backing fabric up underneath. Take your first piece of interfacing, put it right up next to that seam allowance as tight as you can. Pull the fabric over. Don't push it too far in. You don't want to push it in underneath anything. So push it over really close to that seam allowance. Iron it. Flip it over. Put a second piece on top, like this. Pull that over. And fuse it down. Go back to the front side, fuse it again. So you're going to keep doing that all the way. You're going to add two more panels, two more fabric pieces to the left, to the right and the left. Add your interfacing, and that will be your center panel. I'm going to show you right here. So this happens to be using a valley poppy. So we have a bunch of different fabrics. So your center panel, after you get finished doing all of your pieces, your center panel is going to look like this. Once you've added 5 strips together, you're going to go back and you are going to stitch a 1/2 inch away from every seam. So here and here, here and here, here and here, here and here. That stabilizes all the edges of your interfacing so everything is sewn together, and it gives a little decorative touch. The other thing that you want to do is you want to draw a center line. Now the center line is very important for the bag. You'll be using that center line for a lot of different things. So you'll want to draw a center line down that center piece of fabric. And then you're going to cut this to 10.5 inches wide. And you're going to cut it 5 1/4 inches on either side. So your center panel is 10.5 inches wide. The next thing that you're going to do is you are going to place your pocket on this. Now I've placed the pocket on the back already. Now notice how the pocket on the back is a little higher than the pocket on the front, and that's so there won't be a lot of bulk in this next seam. So pin your pocket, and I pin in 4 places on the back. Do the same thing on the front. Now I'm just pinning on the top and the bottom. Now notice how your pocket is slightly wider than the strip. You want to trim that pocket, and you trim it, you can just flip it over and trim it with a rotary cutter before you put on your next strip. So I've got my strips all laid out on my board. I'm going to take the next 2 strips from this side right here. I'm going to place one on top, right sides facing, one underneath, right sides facing. I'm going to pin those on, and I just pin from the top. Actually, on this one I'm going to be sewing from this end, so I'll pin on this end. Again, I'm going to do just like I did in those center panels. I'm going to stitch down here with a 1/4 inch seam, remove my pins. I'm going to flip this out and fuse it to an interfacing strip. Flip it over, place the second interfacing strip, flip this over, fuse that down, and just continue to add your strips until the bag body, or until all your strips are sewn on. So that's it on making the bag from 2.5-inch strips.